Hi, I just wanted to do a real quick scope about something that came came to my spirit earlier today, and so I'm really working hard on when God gives me something to not like procrastinate with speaking it or saying it. So the title of this scope is called "What About Her?" And when I was thinking of when that title came to me, what I was thinking about is how when you your parents were taking you somewhere, or you were about to really do something really fun, and but you had a friend, and your parents would say, okay, come on, let's go, it's time to go, we're going to get ice cream, or we're going to do this, or we're going to do that. And you would look and say, well, what about her? Can she come? you know and the idea was that you were about to benefit or enjoy something, and you wanted to share what you, hi husband, you wanted to share what you were about to receive with another person. And so I just want to use that idea. But then there's another time that we hear, thanks, thanks, Princess. There's another time that, we hear that phrase, or at least growing up, I heard that phrase, what about her? Right? So, on one hand, when we're trying to, you know, invite a friend or have someone included in something that's positive or something that's enjoyable, you're like, what about her? Can she join? But then there are other times where we use that phrase, what about her, when the focus is placed on us and we're trying to defocus and put the focus on someone else. It's like, well, you're talking about what I do, but what about her? And so I just want to just kind of talk a little bit about this thing that God gave me in terms of what about her. In Luke 14 and 23, it says, and the Lord said to the servant, go out into the highways and hedges and compel them to come in in the house come in the house that my house to come in that my house may be filled. And when this phrase, what about her, came to me, I was really kind of thinking about how, every time you're on Facebook, or, any form of social media, or you're attending your local church, there's all of this push and this focus on women's ministry, women's retreats, women's conferences. And that's wonderful. I believe that, even in the secular, there are a lot of events that are women specific focused. And that's great, because women need that, particularly women of color. We need those places of restoration. We need those places of healing. We need those opportunities where we can receive encouragement and instruction about our lives, where we can connect and network and fellowship with other women. We need those opportunities. But the question that I want to present to you is, what about her? And who is the her that I'm talking about? Now, this verse that I read is an excerpt from a parable that Jesus was sharing with the disciples. And without going into a lot of detail, basically there was a banquet that had been prepared, and the people who had been invited did not come. They had no interest in coming. And so Jesus, says, sends the servants and says to the servant, go out into the highways and hedges and compel them to come, that my house may be filled. And so a lot of times we're having conferences and we're having retreats and we're having all of these women events, but there is no push, there is no interest, there's no outreach for other women who are outside in the highways and in the byways and in the hedges. And so the first thing that this parable represents is that it represents the table and the banquet feast is really a representation about God's free grace and mercy that he wanted to make available first to the Jews. And so the Jews rejected Christ. And so the offer of God's free grace and mercy was rejected by Jews. And so Jesus is telling this parable to the disciples. He's telling this parable to the disciples as a reminder that although the Jews were rejecting him and they were therefore rejecting God's free offer of grace and mercy, that they as the disciples were not to focus on the rejection, but they were instead to focus on those who were in the highways, in the byways. And, one of the challenges that I really have with our local church, globally, is that we're doing all of these wonderful events for each other. But what about her? What about the woman or the women, the young girls who are out there stuck in the hedges and in the highways of life? What about those who really need the gospel of grace and mercy? What about those who need to hear the good news? And so, we're so caught up and worried about, who didn't attend our event, who didn't come to our conference, who didn't come to our retreat, that we forget that there is a dying world of women out there who need to hear the good news of God, that need to hear the gospel of Jesus Christ. And so, the first thing is that by in this parable, the references to highways and hedges, Jesus was saying, listen, don't worry about those who don't come to your event. You instead go to the places of disadvantage. Go to the places and this parable, he's really directing them to go to the places where those who are disenfranchised were most likely to dwell. And so he says, go to the places of disadvantages, go to the highways. Highways represented public places, but highways also represented those who are walking in their own way, apart from the will of God. So we were not only to go to the public places, but we are to go to the women who think they got it going on because they got a little bit of money and they got a little bit of education and they got, some things that that people use to quantify success. And he's saying, listen, but they're walking in their own way. They are not in the will of God. They don't know him. And so he's saying, go to the highways. Okay, go to the highways. And then he also says, go to the hedges, right? And the hedges were places where the tramps and the squatters with no homes would sleep. They would sleep under a hedge or a fence. And the hedges, listen to this. According to the commentators, the hedges were made of thick thorns. Sometimes they grew several feet high and they had sharp thorns. They were thick. They could be almost as thick as a man's body. So it wasn't like these little hedges, like little bushes. These were big plants that really served as a fortress around grounds, around the vineyard or whatever. And so it was meant to keep the cattle out. It was meant to keep something out, and it was meant to protect what was in. And so there were workers who were the poorest of the poor. They often worked in these hedges, trimming the hedges. And so when Jesus talks about, first, he sends them to the streets, right? Then he sends them to the highways. Then he sends them to the hedges. Notice the progression of places where he's telling them to go and compel them to come. And what does the word compel there mean? It means to urge them to move beyond their objections and their issues with religion and the church, to move them beyond the feeling of not good enough, the feelings of we won't fit in, the feelings that we don't look like anyone else. Do you know how many women do not come to the church because they are fearful that they are not good enough? They know that their lives are a mess, and they don't want to come in because they feel and they know that they're not good enough. They feel as though they're not good enough, and they're fearful of not fitting in. They're fearful that they don't look like everyone else. They can't dress the part. They don't know all of the church ease, and so when Jesus is talking in this particular parable, he's saying, listen, you got to go to the rough places, those hedges, those thorny places. There are people there who have been disenfranchised. There are women there in our streets, in our neighborhoods, in our communities who are suffering, who are struggling, who need the hope that the gospel of Jesus Christ can offer them. And so where is the church? Where are the women's ministries that are willing to do outreach and include outreach? I ain't talking about superficial show up stuff. I'm talking about really going and dealing with the women in the places that they're in, building relationships with them so that they have the credibility to compel them to come. Yes, they're going to be thorny. Yes, they're going to be challenges. But what about her? What about her? You ought to have concern. We ought to have concern about those who are left in the hedges, those who are in the highways, those who are in the streets. And so I challenge my sisters, I challenge you that when you think about doing your next event, when you think about your women's work within the context of the local church, I encourage you to think about her. Think about the benefits that you have of your relationship with God. Think about those benefits. And I want you to get excited about the benefits, but I don't want you to stop at excitement. I want you to get excited enough that you'll be like you were when you were a young girl, a little child, where you say, wait. What about her? Can she go? Can she come to the table where the feast is spread? Can she come and receive the grace and mercy being offered through the gift of the gospel? What about her? So I challenge you, don't forget about her while you're doing your thing. All these retreats and listen, and we so arrogant with it. We don't even do appeals about salvation because we operate under the presumption that everyone who shows up at those events are in right relationship with Jesus Christ. When in reality, they could be there because someone invited them. When in reality, they could be there but be lost, even though they are in the house. So I leave you with that question. What about her? Our young women are in our streets, in our communities, in our universities. Amen. In our universities, in our ministries, in our churches, on our jobs, in our classrooms, in our workplaces. They are there and they are perishing. But all we're focused on is what we got. And I'm challenging you to move beyond that. God didn't just give me that to challenge you, but he reminds me of that constantly, that I am never, ever to forget where God found me. I am never to forget his grace and his mercy. And because of that, that thing is burned. That burns on the inside of me, that he would desire that no woman be lost, but that everyone come to the knowledge of who he is. And they can't come unless they hear about who he is. And so I'm challenging you to go get her. Next time there is an event, go get her. Don't try to dress her up. Don't try to make her look like you. Don't try to make her act like you or sound like you. Go find her. And if she won't come, then you keep going. And whatever you are learning, you keep going out and you share it with another sister, that she too might experience the hope that comes with knowing Jesus Christ. The hope that comes with knowing Jesus Christ. So God bless you. You know, what about her? What about her? What about her? What about her? Don't worry about what another sister is doing or not doing. You get before God and you ask God to point you to the highway, the hedge, the place where you are to go and do the compelling of those who need to come. Maybe the person who needs to be compelled is right in your own family. Maybe the person who's in the hedge is right in your family. But do the work. One plants, another waters, but God gives the increase. God bless you.